Thank you, Andrew. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today to talk to you. I did come last year and, excuse me, everyone walked around saying, what the hell are you doing here? How do you fit in? And all that. So I took this opportunity to talk to a room full of people rather than doing everyone individually explaining what we do. But fundamentally, we are a franchisor in the old Mastercard, because I'll talk about the new Mastercard as well. So that means that we're not B2B, we're not business to business, we're not business to consumer. People think we issue credit cards or set merchant fees, provide terminals, all that sort of stuff. We don't do that. You'll find that that's what the banks do, and some of our bank customers are here today. So we've been very busy the last couple of years. But first of all, just to sort of talk a bit more about us, and that is we're not just a piece of plastic. People think that's what we are, and we're actually moved quite along from that. So we're one of the world's fastest payments network. We're in 210 countries. And Visa's not our major competitor. People think Visa must be, or Amex or something like that. It's actually cash, because 85% of the world's payments today are still cash. So there's still plenty of opportunity there. Cash delivers a black economy, tax avoidance, all that sort of stuff. So we like to work very closely with government on that sort of thing. But more importantly, it's what we've done more recently so we've bought a company called VocaLink in the UK, which does about 98% of government payments, to government disbursements. It runs all the ATMs in the UK, does about 90% of salaries and about 80% of fast account-to-account payments, which is not what you'd expect from Mastercard. But we had to differentiate. We had to do things. We're under threat by a lot of startups and things like that, so that's what we've done. We now have a loyalty company that we had before. We have 2 payment gateways, one of which is deployed in the islands, and I'll talk a bit more about that. Applied predictive technology allows companies to test and learn marketing campaigns, new products, all of that sort of thing. And probably our most recent one is new data, which enables us to identify a user of a mobile phone by the way they use that mobile phone. Not just biometrics, but the actual way they handle and use the keys and all sorts of stuff. So it's not as creepy as it sounds, but you combine all of these technologies together, and we're headed down a really good path with regard to securing the digital world and things like that. So I won't dwell on this, but these are our 3 main sort of customer groups, which is consumer, our financial institutions. We're moving more out of financial institutions, and I'll cover that off a little bit later. And of course, governments. Once governments understand what we can do for them around payments and consumer payments and things like that. And I've got a couple of examples here about what we've done as well. And the really cool thing I like about working for Mastercard is that when we listed in 2006, we took on we have an Indian CEO. The good thing about that was we were very US focused before that. So when we had someone coming out of Asia Pacific, he had a much thorough understanding of culture, different cultures, impediments to adoptions and all that sort of stuff. So, and what he also did, he gave us an ethos called doing well by doing good. So that means we have a very strong financial inclusion part of what we do around the world. And if I look at the foundation, we established that in 2006 when we listed. We apportioned 10% of our company value, our stock value, to that, and there it stays there today. But in those days when shares were at $39 US, that was $500 million that we put there. We're one of the biggest philanthropic organisations around the world. And then we have the Mastercard Centre for Inclusive Growth, and that's about using what we have to help people. We've done things in Nigeria around supply chain management of tomato cultivation and production and that sort of stuff. A couple of things there we have in the Maldives, a passport card, Nigeria, an identity card that we've helped with, the Bank of Cook Islands debit card, which enables local people to join the financial inclusion, and then something like the Mastercard Aid Network, which is an offline payment solution that works for disaster relief, and we have deployed that in American Samoa. So it allows NGOs to transact with people in a very efficient, fraudulent way offline. So when systems are down, we can still deploy that. So what I'm here to talk about, though, more importantly, is what we've done in the Pacific. And what I'm going to do is go back a couple of years when I first got involved. There were some pretty ordinary things happening, but more importantly is how quickly we've moved to a really first world situation. So I look back in 2016, and for me it was a bit of a back to the future when I first started in cards coming out of law enforcement. So we had people like those people in the picture there, probably not expecting to get caught, but did. And what was happening was there was a lot of skimming, and that was where the magnetic stripe data is stolen off a card and re-encoded onto another card and used. We also had data compromises where people hacked different systems to obtain account numbers, expiry dates, and all of that sort of stuff. And what was happening was international criminals were coming island hopping and coming around to all the islands, and they were from all over the place, from Asia and Eastern Europe. What they were doing was detecting a weakness in a system, and that weakness was that the islands were magnetic stripe technology. So all the ATMs only took magnetic stripe cards, and all the terminals only took magnetic stripe cards. So what that means is that if I skim a card from, say, Australia, and that's a chip country, I use the mag stripe in an ATM here, or not so much here, but in the islands. When that dispute is resolved under the regulations, the liability goes to the non-compliant party. So you have the weakest form of technology, being mag stripe. Guess what? You lose out on that. So here you had people with bags of cards lined up at ATMs pulling tens of thousands of dollars out. That loss went domestic, so it went back to the local bank. So you can see that we had to fix that up. So the impact was financial. So obviously banks were losing money, merchants were losing money, cardholders were losing money. And it was, the reputational damage was probably the worst thing that happened, because banks from other countries were saying, I don't trust these countries. So what they would do is block transactions or only allow their customers to travel to countries, not transact at point of sale. So local merchants weren't able to transact because they would block it. But they say, no, you can go to an ATM because I know that'll be validated by PIN at least. Then they'd be pulling cash out. So then consumers are wandering around the islands with just enough cash on them to see them through. So they don't have discretionary capability of being able to transact with a card. So it's a terrible experience. It impacted tourism and GDP because it's all just ATM transactions. It's not spent at local merchants. So it was something we really had to address. So what we had to do, we had to remove the magnetic stripe. Cards and the terminals and ATM will still do it, but we had to get the core technology had to be EMV across the terminals, the ATMs and cards. But what was important about this, we had to leverage that migration to chip card and really set the region up for the future. And that's actually what we've done, and it's really exciting news. But the key to all of this, we had to have collaboration. So all the banks had to work together, which they did. Commitment to making certain things happen within a certain time frame, but also realising the value of payments, because often it's looked at as a cost, especially at a wholesale level, but everyone forgot what it actually brings. That you wouldn't have tourism, you wouldn't have e-commerce if it wasn't for us, because that's how e-commerce started. You could only transact with credit cards, or cards, I shouldn't say credit all the time. But the really cool bit for this was about being fit for mobile, because when you deploy contactless technology at the point of sale, you can take a phone payment. Now, you can't dip a phone into a terminal. I've tried, it doesn't work, but you certainly can tap a phone. So what that means is creating this seamless experience for all the major tourism areas, Australia and New Zealand, who are now virtually, Australia's 93% contactless, New Zealand's probably about 70% of volume. So it makes sense that we create that same secure, fast, BAU experience that I'm quite used to. And it's not always about speed, like it's about actually being fit for mobile. We heard the Prime Minister talk about mobile phone adoption today is on the increase. So it just made sense to actually leverage that. And then increase GDP as we do that, because the money's actually electronic, the spending is electronic. And we can grow B2B payments and also person-to-person remittances, which is a bit of a bugbear for locals around the cost of remittance, and also for the sending as well, with a view of financial inclusion as well, so bringing people into the payment system. And then adoption. We had to convince the market to adopt contactless technology as part of all of this. which, to their credit, they did. So what did we contribute? So what we did in regard to the EMV and contactless, we contributed money. I'm not going to say how much it is because it doesn't matter, but we were the first and probably the biggest supporter to contribute to enable the upgrade across all those islands. Because if we didn't do all the islands, someone would work out what island doesn't have this technology and would smash that island, and we saw that during the process. So we've helped to remove the data compromise threat that was there, and more importantly, we delivered on-source training. So we brought experts from Singapore down here to talk about EMV and fraud training. We ran fraud training courses. And then what we did, in my risk days, I worked with the industry and we established an Australasian Risk Council and a PCI around data security. So what we did, we established about a year ago now the Pacific Islands Risk Council, which PNG is part of that. And this allows all the islands to set up a network to talk about emerging threats and how they're dealing with problems, and then we talk to them as well. Now they manage that. We don't have anything to do with that. But now we just turn up as guest presenters. We've handed that off to the industry. We deployed some forensic fraud terminals in PNG and Fiji. They are terminals that can read these dodgy cards that come in, so that allows banks to work with law enforcement to determine the true impact or the full level of criminality when there's cards seized at borders or wherever. But more importantly, we've delivered the foundation for mobile and digital next steps for the market. So the current state is very exciting. So Fiji and PNG ATMs are 100%. Contactless has been deployed in 10 countries. Already the volume in PNG is 16% of our Mastercard volume is tapped, and in Fiji it's now around 20%. So that's amazing in such a short period of time. And now we've got a world-class payment gateway. The important thing about the payment gateway, so we deployed that with a couple of banks across the islands. The important thing about that, and I was able to show the Reserve Bank of Fiji this, is that once we do that, that spend is in country, so it contributes to the GDP, especially around tourism, because a lot of tourism spend before that was aggregated out of Australia or New Zealand, where people were buying their travel product from home at home. But what we're doing here is enabling local businesses to take those payments direct. So that means that volume or that value that they put through sits on the local GDP. So Fiji's gone through the roof, for example, and they're quite delighted about that. The fraud, I asked our fraud guy on Friday, how's it looking? He said, what fraud? So that's come down to virtually zero. And the reputation's been restored, so we're not seeing the blocking that was going on by the big banks in Australia and New Zealand anymore. And now we're further looking to leverage the work that we've already done. So now a bit about the future, just my last slide. So we have a really good future in the islands. It's so exciting. I'm delighted with where it's gone. So we have really good acceptance infrastructure, both at the point of sale and online. We have high mobile phone penetration, and now we can build on the contactless work that we've done with all the banks. And what I mean by that is mobile acceptance. So we've got a consortium together at the moment, which be good to talk to the government guys about this, where we've brought partners together to deliver a low-cost solution so that small to medium enterprises can take card payments at a very, very low rate, which is what is the key to growing all of this. And the other one is it allows wearables. So things like this ring. So a year ago I bought this ring. I showed a few bank guys and they were amazed. That's already been commercialised by Bank West. So it's already a live ring. So what it allows me to do is to top that ring up. I can tap and go wherever I want. So there's a convenience of that. I can't show you how it works because I got this off my wife and I'm pretty sure there's no money left on it. But so these things are not that far away, and there's so many applications for these things for Pacific Island countries, including PNG. That's just great that now we're actually in a great position to leverage from that. So from a network point of view, our network is 52 years old. It's never been hacked, a touch wood. It stood the test of time. But one of the sort of, you never say final frontiers in risk management, but certainly tokenisation is front and centre. So we're mandated now tokenisation of account numbers. So that means account numbers won't be going through the network anymore after like a bit over a year's time. So we're mandating tokenisation. So that means no one in that value chain or that ecosystem will be storing card numbers. So that's going to remove a whole lot of things. We're also bringing in pricing at a wholesale level to change that behaviour, to incentivise a stronger level of security. And then digital identity solutions. So, for example, what we do today is we look at transactions to try and predict what a fraud looks like. But the real trick to this is ensuring that the person making the transaction is you. And the way we can do that is leveraging some of the technology that we've acquired and now developing, which means that there's 140 security elements on a phone that allows me to identify that that's actually me, including biometrics, the way I use use the phone, and all those sort of things. So we're actually heading down a much more secure path by using phones for transactions. On the gateway side, it's enabling business to accept directly as opposed to having to give it away to overseas aggregators. Cross-border B2B, there's cable going in everywhere. The Prime Minister talked about the cable to Australia. That enables much faster, much more reliable and B2B payments and things like that rather than TTs, and that's where I guess we play. And also remote and mobile payments we can leverage from that technology as opposed to O3B and those sorts of things. From a partnership point of view, we're seeing more and more opportunity to partner with non-financial institutions, and then at a bank level, there's emerging local banks. So Bank of Cook Islands is a perfect example of a local bank, how we help get them sponsored on, and they're smashing it. And now we're talking to Kina Bank about something as well. Rugby World Cup, we're sponsoring Rugby World Cup for yet another tournament, so that enables our customers and that to leverage that. And in our division, which is Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, we've got nearly a quarter of the whole tournament covered off there. So we will look to leverage that. And then, of course, tourism. So we have an ability to market a region to our billions of cardholders. So we can create things like Priceless Pacific and all that sort of stuff. And also leveraging our financial inclusion capabilities to help with sort of research and that to help invest in tourism training and things like that that could actually be lacking, and was one of the things, again, that the Prime Minister called out today. So yeah. So that's a very quick update on what we do. I'm just trying to help Andrew with the timing, so hopefully I've done that. But I'll be hanging around for lunch. If anyone wants to have a chat, I'm more than happy to have a chat. But you can see there, just in closing, that we're in really good shape. I can't believe in the short period of time, albeit 2 years, how far we've come. But to put it in perspective, we're going to do chip and pin, and we are doing chip and pin where other big markets like the US are still doing chip and signature, which, I'm not sure that's always the way to go, but we are right up there in PNG. So thank you very much. Thank you.